Without further ado, let me welcome Dr. Andrew Walker, Senior Fellow at the Department of Political and Social Change. Andrew researches issues of rural development in northern Thailand, but he's also the co-founder of the New Mandala blog, which provides anecdote, analysis, and new perspectives on mainland Southeast Asia, but increasingly on Malaysia as well. So he has something in common with our speaker tonight, and we'll do the honors of introducing Raja Petra. Andrew?
Thank you. You don't usually have introductions for the introducer, but I'm happy to go with that. I feel a little bit of a fraud here because I think I probably know less about Malaysian politics than probably everyone in the room. As was indicated, I prefer to work on more mature democracies like Thailand. In fact, my knowledge of Malaysian politics is so poor, I thought the MCLM was a Roman numeral when I first saw the release for this. But I've done a bit of reading and I now understand that Raja Petra is going to talk to us tonight about the Malaysian Civil Liberties Movement and bringing some of his previous perspective and current perspective as a very prominent blog activist in Malaysia. And blogging is something I do know a little bit about. As was mentioned, I, with colleague Nick Farrelly, have run the New Mandala blog for the last 5 years. And though at a much lower level, I think, than Malaysia Today, we have gained some appreciation of the potential of blogging to put it frankly, to annoy governments within the region. And I think there's a real role for blogging to work with broader civil liberties movement in promoting the cause of democracy in mainland Southeast Asia. So I'm delighted to welcome you all today to the College of Asia and the Pacific. I'm delighted to welcome Raja Petra Kamarudin to speak to us tonight. A few brief words on our rules of engagement for this evening. Raja Petra will speak for about 40 minutes and then we will have another 40 or 45 minutes for question and answers. Then we'll have some brief announcements and then you can all leave and make your donations outside. So we'll have plenty of time for discussion after we hear from Raja Petra, who I'd like to welcome now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Which mic do I speak into? All the same, yeah? Okay. Now, once I reach my 40 minutes, can you sort of just give me the time out? Because we want to try to keep within the schedule. Because I'm sure there's a lot of you here who have a lot of questions to ask. And if you ask me nicely, I probably will answer some of them. And please be as controversial as you want, because controversial is my middle name, and we invite controversy. Now, first of all, thank you all for turning up here tonight. I assume everyone here is Malaysian. Anyone who's not Malaysian, who may not know Malaysian politics? Yeah? Okay, because then I'll have to explain certain terminologies. If not, you'll be lost. Because some things are just known by Malaysians. Like if I say correct, every Malaysian knows what it means. And non-Malaysians will be wondering what's the joke, you see. Now, a few questions I've been asked since I landed in Australia about 2 weeks ago. I've met some supporters in Perth. I've met some supporters in Sydney. I've also done a few interviews with Radio Australia, ABC, and some newspapers. And I think the common question is what's happening in North Africa and the Middle East going to spill over to Malaysia? Is Malaysia going to also be affected by the dominoes? I say no. And of course, a lot of people are quite disappointed. They say, you've killed my story. They're hoping I will say, yeah, Malaysia is the next domino to fall. Now, I say it will not. For the simple reason, in the Middle East, it is the people versus the government. When the people rise, they topple the government. In Malaysia, it is two political groupings fighting each other over who should run Malaysia. The people's involvement is negligible. And as much as we try to involve the people in this movement, most Malaysians are quite contented to leave things as they are. The Chinese will say, as long as we make money, I mean, who cares? After all, wasn't it Deng Xiaoping who said, never mind whether it's a black cat or a small cat, or rather a white cat or a black cat, as long as a cat catches a mouse. So they're not worried whether we're going to have Barisan Nasional or Pakatan Rakyat as the government, as long as under whichever government we can continue making money. The Malays are only concerned with the handouts, and unfortunately the Indians are not quite sure what they want. So we have the Indians uniting under Hindraf, and about 4 or 5 other political parties, each whacking one another. And they tried to, I would think, revive Hindraf, but some people say Hindraf never died, so what's there to revive? But the latest Hindraf gathering did not quite reflect the support. So while the Indians are united under Hindraf, the Chinese are united by their bank drafts. And as long as there's money in the bank, they're quite prepared to leave things alone. And of course the Malays, they want the new economic policy to continue. They want government handouts, government contracts to continue. And they're united by the overdraft. And most of them are in debt and cannot pay their debts, and the government has to bail them out later at the cost of the taxpayers' money. So this is the state of affairs in Malaysia. It's all about bread and butter. It's all about how much money I have in the bank. And until we can get Malaysians to be lean and hungry, rather than now, fat and lazy, and even political activists like me have put on a lot of weight, so we are certainly far from hungry, we will never see a people's uprising. What we will see instead are political parties, or two political parties, fighting over power. I suppose in a way it's the same like in Thailand. The economy is booming. I was in Thailand a month before this, and I could see that everything's thriving. I mean, I went to a car workshop, and there were these cars that cost like a million ringgit, or like 300,000 Aussie dollars. And you had to book ahead because there's not enough cars, cars were being sold. And I asked my friends in Thailand, how come cars costing a million ringgit can sell so well? The economy is booming, and people have a lot of money. And of course, when I go to the shopping areas, you go to Pat Pong and all those other, it's shoulder to shoulder. You're knocking into each other. The crowd is so big, and people are shopping. So in Thailand also, there's no such thing as people's power. What you have are the yellow shirts and the red shirts fighting each other, And it's only in a small part of Bangkok. It's not even in the whole of Thailand, or not even the whole of Bangkok. And I was there, and there was a demonstration of the red shirts. 2 days later, the yellow shirts, and we were not even aware there was a demonstration going on. It's sort of like so low-key, but there were thousands of people. So when you look at the Thailand situation, and you look at the Malaysian situation, where the economy is booming, or at least perceived to be booming, you'll never have a people's power, or people's revolution. So where do we, the people, fit into the whole scheme of things? Now, the Chinese have accepted the fact that they're second-class citizens in Malaysia, and they're not going to upset things by demanding equal citizenship. We're trying to tell the Chinese that this so-called second-class citizen and so on, is all a fallacy. Because Malays, like me for instance, we also feel like we're second-class citizens in the country. And at least the Chinese are second-class citizens and they have money. The Malays are second-class citizens and we are broke. Who then is really the rulers of Malaysia? It is the UMNO Putras, not the Bumi Putras. And the UMNO Putras is just a handful of political leaders. And don't forget, when we say UMNO Putras, we're talking about Barisan Nasional. And within the UMNO Putra network are also MCA, MIC, Gerakan, and the other Chinese and Indians and the natives of Sabah and Sarawak. So it's all about controlling the money. And all those who work within Barisan Nasional's cronyism or crony network, they all make money. Yesterday they charged one MCA minister. Last year they charged another one. There's actually 2 or 3 more key MCA people who are also involved in this 12 billion scandal. Now, how did MCA get its hands on a project worth 12 billion? It was something that UMNO gave MCA to fund their political party, to fund the elections. But because of public pressure, because of blogs, the internet, political activists, they've now had to take action against some of these leaders. Whether they're going to be convicted and sent to jail eventually, we don't know. It could be like Eric Cha, another of the cronies, the late Eric Cha, who was actually put on trial and acquitted on grounds that there was no evidence he committed any crime. It could be a short trial, just to make people believe that some people are being punished. But at the end of the day, the 12 billion is still gone. We're not getting back any of that 12 billion, just like the 8 or 9 billion which was lost in Pawaja. Eric Cha was acquitted, he died soon after that, and the money is gone anyway. So Malaysian politics is a very strange animal. As much as the opposition would like to believe that Malaysian politics is about people's power, but the people do not come at all into the equation. In 1999, it was a personal fight between Anwar Ibrahim and Dr. Mahathir. And the rest of the politicians aligned themselves either with Mahathir or with Anwar. Now is a fight between Najib and Anwar. So you just decide whether you support Najib or you support Anwar. It's always been about personalities, Malaysian politics. Semangat 46 days, we talk about 1990. Let's go back 20 years. In 1990, it was about Tengku Razali and Mahathir. It's about 2 personalities disagreeing and splitting into 2 different groupings and fighting over power. And we, the rakyat, the citizens of Malaysia, are led to believe that they are fighting for us, and we come out and vote for the party that we think is fighting for justice, fighting for human rights, fighting for civil liberties, fighting our cause, basically. Now, we tested the sincerity, the determination, the commitment of the political parties. Now, if you see in 1990, when 2 groups went to battle, the people stayed out. And eventually, of course, Semangat 46 closed down and everyone rejoined the ruling party, rejoined UMNO. In 1999, we were broke again into reformasi and pro-government. It did relatively well in the 1999 elections. 2004, it was a disaster for the opposition. Why? Now, this was already anticipated, and it was anticipated way back in the year 2000, 4 years before the election and 1 year after the 99 victory, if you want to call it that, for the opposition. What united us then back in 99, we were united by the hate for Dr. Mahathir. It was a Mahathir hate factor. Now, because we all share a common hate, so we unite under one umbrella to try to bring down Mahathir. And that's because of what Mahathir did to Anwar. But how long can a marriage of hate or unity of hate last? If we were united by love or by a common platform, fine. But when we were united merely out of convenience, it's like all the Taliban's getting together because they got these Russian invaders to kick out of Afghanistan. But once the Russian invaders pack up and go home to Moscow, then the Taliban shoot each other again like they used to for the last few hundred years. So we need a common enemy to unite, but we're going to be whacking each other as soon as there's no common enemy anymore. Now, when Mahathir, in his wisdom, resigned in 2003 and handed power to Abdullah Badawi, within a few months, Abdullah Badawi called for a new election, and it was the best performance ever. So what we anticipated in the year 2000 became a reality. The people hate Mahathir. If Mahathir stays as Prime Minister the next election, 2004, then we're probably going to sweep the country. If Mahathir is smart and he resigns and he hands over power to his deputy, and his deputy calls an election within just a few months while the honeymoon period is still there, the opposition is going to be massacred. And true enough, Mahathir resigned, handed power to Abdullah Badawi. Within a few months, Abdullah called for a new election, and we got whacked. In fact, PKR, then the leading party, which was led by Anwar's wife, Wan Aziza, practically wiped out, including Wan Aziza herself. On the first count she lost, on the second count she actually won. And they tried to contest this in court, but the court ruled in her favor, so she managed to keep her seat. If not, the whole of PKR would have been wiped out. How do we galvanize the rakyat, galvanize the people, other than build up the hatred for the government? This has been a dilemma faced by the opposition for some time now. And even as far back as the year 2000, the opposition agreed that the Mahathir hate factor is the factor that's uniting everyone against Barisan Nasional. But how do we transfer this hate into something else? What happens if Mahathir dies? What happens if Mahathir resigns? What are we going to offer as the alternative to unite the people? The opposition was at a loss. They acknowledged the fact that the only thing uniting everybody was the hate for Mahathir. And if Mahathir goes, the hate will end. But what do we do then? How do we go back to the people and tell the people, support us, vote for us? Well, this happens a lot in Malaysia. In fact, by now there'll be 6 policemen standing behind me. So, the opposition could not come out with a new factor. Now, come 2009, when we expected the next election, because it's supposed to be every 5 years, so 2008, 2009, what are we going to do? Our biggest problem, we were still divided by race. Reformasi was a Malay thing. 1990, 10 years before that, Semangat 46 was a Malay thing. That's why Semangat and PAS swept Kelantan, Terengganu, and half of Kedah, more than half in fact. Out of 15 parliament seats, they got 8. So how do we tell the Chinese and Indians that you have to join the movement? You have to team up with the Malays if we want to see change. In 1999, we almost succeeded. We almost succeeded. We got quite a few Chinese on our side. We even got all those pig farmers in Negeri Sembilan to come and join us, you know. And of course it was strange having this past Islamic party teaming up with the pig farmers of Negeri Sembilan, you know. And but as what the past people say, Islam bans you from eating pork, but there's no mention that you cannot team up with pig farmers, you know. Now, the Chinese were scared. During the 1999 elections, when Mahathir launched the Barisan National Election Machinery live in Bukit Jalil Stadium, what Mahathir said was, in 1969, exactly 30 years before, the Chinese voted opposition. And because the Chinese voted opposition, the government lost its two-thirds majority in parliament. And because the government lost its two-thirds majority in parliament, race riots erupted, May 13. Now, 1999, in the elections coming in the next few weeks, if again the Chinese vote opposition, and if again Barisan loses its two-thirds majority, the government is going to be weak without its two-thirds majority, and a weak government cannot guarantee the safety of the people. Now there was a threat. First of all, in 1969 there was no Barisan Nasional, it was an alliance party. And the other thing is, so what if you lose your two-thirds majority in parliament? So what if only 52% of the members of parliament are from your party? It's the police and army who patrol the streets, not the members of parliament. So why can't the government guarantee the safety of its citizens? This threat was taken very seriously, and the fact that in the few days of the campaign leading to the elections, the army trucks were sent into the Chinese areas to patrol the streets up and down. Every half an hour you see the army trucks patrolling the streets. This made the Chinese very scared. So a lot of the Chinese said, we support you in our heart, but we will still vote for the government. And we did quite well, 52 parliament seats, 2 states, Terengganu, Kelantan, and as I said, even more than half the parliament seats in Kedah. But note one thing, all those seats are Malay seats, Malay majority, where the Malay voters are like 97%, 98%, almost 100% of the population. Those where the Malays are like 80%, where the non-Malays are like 20%, all those seats fell to the government. So the only way you can win is when the seat is above 95%. If it's below 80%, those seats are going to be government seats. Because any mixed constituency seats, especially if it's 50-50, you're not going to get the non-Malay support, the Chinese and Indians. After the 2004 fiasco, we decided we need to reach out to the Chinese, to the Indians, to the people of Sabah, Sarawak. And we need to convince them that there'll be no May 13 version 2. There'll be no second race riot. Even if Barisan loses two-thirds majority, even if Barisan loses a few states, 4, 5, 6 states, there'll be no race riot. Now you have to understand, in 1969, when you divide the opposition, politically, opposition and ruling government, politically, you can also divide them racially. It's automatic. If you're anti-government, you're Chinese. If you're pro-government, you're Malay. So when we split the people according to political platforms, we also split them according to racial platforms. Now, in 2004, or 2000 upwards, there were many Malays in the opposition. In fact, UMNO only got 51% of the votes. 49% of the votes went to the opposition. And a lot of the seats UMNO lost are Malay majority seats. it is not possible to start another race riot if the people vote opposition, because these people who vote opposition are Malays. But because it's only the Malays, and the Chinese either abstain from voting or vote ruling party, we're not going to go beyond that. We have to assure the Chinese that the Malays will prevent another May 13. The Malays will prevent another race riot. And that's what Dr. Hatta Ramli of PAS said. In all his talks where he went round, especially when you're speaking to the Chinese, he guaranteed the Chinese, if UMNO ever tries to start another race riot, the Malays will be there, right in the front. The Malays are prepared to defend the Chinese. And Dr. Hatta openly challenged UMNO and said, don't ever try to threaten the Chinese with a race riot. If you do, it'll be over our dead bodies. Langkah mayat kami dulu. And this was assurance given. This gave the Chinese the courage to vote opposition. In 2004, after that worst election ever for the opposition, we launched a few movements and blogs and websites. Malaysia Today was launched in 2004. This was in preparation for the next election in 2009. The Malaysian Civil Liberties Society, we launched it in 2004, but 6 years on and we still could not get the Registrar of Societies to approve the registration. So last year, we registered it in England and we got it registered immediately. So now we are operating under MCLM, Malaysian Civil Liberties Movement. Now under these movements, the civil society movements and the various blogs and websites, we wanted to reach out to the urban people, because this is where the problem lies. The rural people, I think they're quite fixed as what they want to do. Those who are pro-UMNO are pro-UMNO. We used to say, you take a pro-UMNO guy and you submerge him in the river, pull him up, he'll still say UMNO, submerge him in UMNO. And the same goes PAS. You can put him in the river, pull him up, he says PAS, he'll never change. But it's the urban, the 40% floating. Now, rule of thumb, you can say 30% of the population are pro-government, 30% of the population are opposition. But that 40% floating. And when you need about 5% to decide who's going to be running the country or who's going to be forming the government, 40% is a lot. And one of the roles of Malaysia Today and those many other blogs, not just Malaysia Today, is to expose as much as possible to the people the untold story. There's a lot of untold stories in Malaysia, and they remain untold because the entire media in Malaysia is controlled by the government. It's either government-owned or government-licensed. And the government's very proud that Malaysia practices self-censorship. Not that they have any choice. Now, I think when the Chinese realized that 90% of the income tax, I'm not talking about like Petronas or corporate tax, those are GLCs. We're talking about individual tax. Even Mahathir himself said so. 90% of the tax is paid by the Chinese. Only 10% of the tax comes from the Indians and the Malays. So it's the Chinese money that's being wasted. Now, a lot of you are here on pharma scholarships. Father, mother. And the Malays are sent here on government scholarships. So again, the Malays get free education and you pay for your education. And that's why a lot of people, after they get their education, they stay on. They don't go back to Malaysia. I met many Malaysians who came here as students 20, 30 years ago and are still here. Don't you want to do something about it? You are being called pendatang, you are being called penompang, you know. And you are basically told you're not welcome in Malaysia. And if you don't like it, tough, go back to China from where you came from. But the problem, you can't go back to China because you did not come from China, you're born in Malaysia. Now, why do you tolerate all this? Why don't you fight back? And from 2004, we started sending this message out. We're with you. Don't succumb to threats. They say May 13 and everything. No, no. The next May 13, the next race riot is not going to be Malay versus Chinese. It's going to be Malay versus Malay. So we tell you, Chinese, just stay home, lock your doors. No need to sharpen your parangs. Since you got a lot of money, buy some parangs and donate it to us. And we'll do the fighting. And this was proven after 2008 in a few incidences where they tried to start some race thing. And the Malays were on the streets and it didn't happen, it failed. So it's not just talk. Remember the anti-Lim Guan Eng demonstration in front of Komta in Penang? You had 500 UMNO members there. But it looked like an MIC meeting. Because they were actually mamaks, you know. And yeah, I mean, there are many UMNO branches in Penang that conduct their meetings in Tamil. So, and 500 of them came out. They wanted to threaten race riot. They were angry with the Chinese minister, whereas they've always had a Chinese chief minister from the very beginning. I mean, it's not like only now we're having a Chinese chief minister, you know. We've never had a Malay chief minister since Merdeka. And with the 500 UMNO members there, we had 1,000 Malays from the opposition. And as they were shouting and screaming and asking for Lim Guan Eng's blood, the Malays, 1,000 of them in front of Komta said, you want to go and lynch Guan Eng? Come over my body first. And it ended. It ended, everyone went home and nothing happened, yeah? So many instances since 2008, there was actually a demonstration of how genuine the Malays were in preventing another race riot. And it takes two hands to clap. If the UMNO people come out and no one else layan, no one else entertain, they can go waving their parangs and go home. No one's going to come and offer their head to be chopped off. You know? I think we managed to reach the Chinese because in 2008, or rather in 2007, when we did that massive demonstration going to the Agong's Palace to demand reforms, 50,000 people came out, and a lot of them were Chinese, Indians, and others. Prior to that, if you see any demonstration, you'll see a sea of white caps. Everyone had a white cap on his head, all past people. But this time, we had young people, and we had a lot of non-Malays as well. So we knew that there was response from the non-Chinese. And like it or not, PAS had to come to terms with DAP. DAP said it opposes the Islamic State. PAS agreed not to talk about it anymore. They say they have not quite abandoned their aspiration of an Islamic State, but they are practical to know it cannot be done. And they're quite prepared to leave this issue aside in the interest of solidarity. And it was a victory. 2008, we won 82 seats out of 222. We denied Barisan their 2/3. We swept 5 states, dropped back to 4. When they took back Perak, there was a frog festival. and a few frogs jumped. But what we are more worried are the frogs that are being slowly boiled. And that the Chinese and the Indians and all those people who think everything is honky-dory, and there they are sitting in cold water with a fire under them, and the water's boiling slowly and they don't know that they're being boiled. And by the time they realize, it's too late. They're already soup. And this is what we want the non-Malays to understand. There's a lot of propaganda out there, mainstream media, but when you come overseas, from the outside looking in, you see things clearer than if you were to be back in Malaysia. But it's not good enough. We have what, 16,000 eligible voters out of 27 million Malaysians, a 27 million population. We got 15 to 16 million eligible voters, but only 11 million are registered to vote. The other 5 million don't register. And out of the 11 million who are registered to vote, only 7 million come out to vote. The other 3 to 4 million do not vote. So which means out of what, 15 to 16 million eligible voters, half, 50% vote. The other 50% don't vote or don't register to vote. Now, do you know we needed only 300,000 votes? Just another 300,000 votes to form the government, the federal government. And here we got what, something like about 5, 6 million, 7 million who don't bother to vote, and we needed only 300,000. If another 300,000 votes had gone to the opposition, today we would have a new federal government. And that's how close we were to forming the new federal government. Can we do it next election? Can we continue the 2008 tsunami, the success of 2008, and bring it to even, new heights? Now, the opposition got half the votes. The ruling party got only half. But with half their votes, they can still get 60% of the seats. That's because of gerrymandering. Where the government is strong, the voters are few. Where the government is weak, there are more voters. Putrajaya, as an example, has only about 5,000 voters for a parliament seat. Gua Musang, another strong area, is about 20,000 voters. Places like Kepong, Selayang has 120,000 voters because that seat is hardcore opposition. Now, if we had a ceiling of, say, 50,000, each seat is 50,000 voters, plus minus, say, 20%, so between 40 to 60,000. Putrajaya will not exist. There will be no seat called Putrajaya. Gua Musang will not exist. And seats like Selayang or Kepong or Jinjang, that area, will probably be cut into 3 seats. Which means the opposition with 50% of the votes or 55% of the votes can form the government. But now, the opposition will have to win at least 60% minimum. 60% to form the government, even then with a simple majority, without 2/3. The gerrymandering is such that Barisan Nasional, with a mere 40% of the votes, can still form the government. And they know it's impossible for the opposition to get 60%. It cannot be done unless we can get, number one, more people to register and more people to vote. Number two, unless we can conquer East Malaysia. That is actually a bigger problem. 5 more minutes, okay. We cut Malaysia into East and West, or Peninsula. In Peninsular Malaysia, we got 165 parliament seats. In East Malaysia, we got 57 parliament seats. 165 parliament seats in West Malaysia is split down the middle. About 80 seats belong to Pakatan, about 80 over seats belong to Barisan. So the 165 is already well divided, almost half-half. Maybe 2 or 3 seats difference. But in East Malaysia, out of 57, 55 are with the ruling party. Only 2 are with the opposition. Whoever wants to form the next government has to first of all win Sabah Sarawak. And Barisan Nasional has already said Sabah Sarawak are their fixed deposits. That came from Barisan Nasional, which means the key to Putrajaya is in the hands of Sabah Sarawak. And whoever rules Sabah Sarawak will rule the whole of Malaysia. And currently, we do not see the opposition making any headway in Sabah Sarawak. Now, one bone of contention which we have, the MCLM. Why do we play the race and religion game in Sabah Sarawak? The Muslims are a minority in Sabah Sarawak. Yet, the opposition, in particular Anwar Ibrahim, wants a Muslim to head Sabah and Sarawak. There are a lot of Christians in Sabah Sarawak, very angry Christians. The issue of body snatching, the issue of Christians can't use the word Allah in the Quran, and even the Malay language version of the Quran cannot be printed, and all those kind of things. So they're very angry. Now they want change because they want religious freedom, they want equality. And here we are upsetting them further by stressing that only a Muslim can lead Sabah and Sarawak. Now we feel the opposition is gambling with the sentiments of the East Malaysians, thinking that the East Malaysians will support change, but the East Malaysians are not prepared to support change if what they see is just one federal government exchanged for another federal government, or one colonial party exchanged for another colonial party. What they want is autonomy. What they want is to respect the spirit of the 20-point and 18-point agreement signed before Sabah Sarawak became part of Malaysia. They do not want to be treated as one of the 13 states, because they were never one of the states. They were equal to Malaya, not equal to Selangor, Perak, Penang, or whatever. And this seems to be an issue which the opposition cannot address. So what I'm saying is, for the opposition to form the next government, they must increase their current 80 seats to at least 130. Yeah? We're talking about another, 40, maybe 50 seats which the opposition has to get. They cannot get those seats in West Malaysia. They have to get those seats from East Malaysia. Our concern, the Civil Liberties Movement, our concern is not whether the opposition can increase their seats from 80 to 120 or 130, but can they even retain their 80 currently? Or will it slide down to 50 and we end up like what happened in 99, where the opposition only had 50 seats? That appears to be a likelihood, and we can't seem to get the opposition parties to agree that they're living in denial mode. They are complacent, and the MCLM has made demands that we want to present our election manifesto, and we want to see the quality of the candidates before the election, and not surprise us on the day, the polling day itself, by introducing candidates who are going to be rejected by the rakyat. Now, a lot of people have told me, people on the ground, they are not going to vote unless they see the quality of the candidates. We told Anwar this when we met him in London. He agreed, but he has a problem. He cannot reveal the candidates too early. If he reveals the candidates too early, they might be bought off. I say, in that case, there can't be good candidates. Because if you win the election, then they will be bought off. And we can't seem to get the opposition to bring itself out of Merdeka politics. When we say Merdeka politics, it's the politics of 1957. They're still stuck in the past. And what they fail to see is the world has moved on. People are more sophisticated, people are better read, people are better informed. And unless the opposition can come to terms with this, I think we're going to see Barisan Nasional the government for many, many more years to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was entertaining and fascinating. Now, we've got plenty of times for questions and answers. I will ask that if you have a question that you project your voice very nicely, because we don't have any roving mics and we want everyone to hear the questions, and if we need to, we might have to repeat them down here. So you're happy to stand here and field questions? Okay. So let's go with it. Does anyone want to kick the questioning off? Don't be shy. Okay, yes.
Thank you for your interesting talk. I wanted to ask something about the media and the power of media. It strikes me that when things happen in Indonesia, there's an awful lot of international media attention, whereas with the Malaysian developments, the international media attention seems to be much lower. And I was wondering what your thoughts are on that, and to what extent you believe that international pressure can help the development of Malaysian politics and democracy.
Yes, we met some members of Parliament today, Australian members of Parliament, and they've admitted that there doesn't seem to be much focus on Malaysia any longer. And they focus more on countries like Indonesia and of course the Middle East, where things are happening. I think in a way people have become tired of developments in Malaysia, and it's not quite like the government is stifling the opposition. You see, in Malaysia we do have freedom of speech. We don't have freedom after speech, but we do have freedom of speech, and we have the internet. So this is the impression that democracy exists in Malaysia. Who says democracy does not exist? Now, people equate democracy as just what? The freedom to criticize. So as long as you can criticize, there must be democracy. But what about the various laws that we have in Malaysia? For instance, students cannot participate in politics under the University College Act. You can't print a newspaper unless you get a license, and they will not give you a license even if you apply under the Printing Press Publication Act. If you say something that the government doesn't like and is interpreted as sedition, you can get arrested and sent to jail under the Sedition Act. So there's a lot of acts which can be used. And if they fail to find any law suitable to get you on, then there's always the Internal Security Act. It's a cure-all law. And as Mahathir said, when he was during the time he was Prime Minister, the ISA is not a law to punish you, because if you had committed a crime, we just arrest you and charge you. It is a law to prevent you from committing a crime. In other words, it's as Mahathir said, a preventive law. So even as you are thinking about committing a crime, while it's still in your head, we arrest you. And from your face, I know you're thinking of something. So the look on your face is good enough for us to detain you. Now, you probably think it's funny for the Prime Minister to say that, but he actually said that. It's a preventive law. He says, look at the New York Twin Towers, Mahathir said. They don't have a law like us in Malaysia. Now, if they had ISA in America, they could have arrested those people before they bombed the Twin Towers. That's why the American Twin Towers is destroyed, but Kuala Lumpur Twin Towers is still standing. Because we have a good law like the ISA. Now you talk to any media people, newspaper, mainstream newspaper, opposition newspaper, and you ask them what's their greatest fear. Their greatest fear is ISA. I mean, I met many Malaysians here in Australia. And a lot of them don't even dare take photographs with me because they say, whoa, what happens if someone, the police get to see these photographs? They take me under ISA. You mean taking photographs with me is good enough to get under ISA? So this is the very high fear. So what the government has successfully done is it has, instilled this fear factor. And there's a very high degree of fear in Malaysia, and everything goes back to ISA. That is why we are fighting hard to get the ISA removed. But if you want me to talk about the ISA, that's a separate talk by itself. It's a very long subject. But the point is, the ISA is a very useful weapon for the government to keep the people in check and to force the newspapers to have a self-censorship, practice self-censorship. But as for the opposition blogs, we have managed to fill that vacuum, that vacuum where the real news is not coming. And I think to a certain extent we have managed to penetrate quite a big segment of Malaysia's population. A lot of people now do not even buy mainstream newspapers anymore. They've totally stopped reading or buying mainstream newspapers for many, many years now. And they get all their news from the internet or even from their handphone. They subscribe and it comes in direct to their handphone. Now, the ministers just announced, Malaysia is about to touch 60% broadband internet penetration. It's now about 57%. The target is 60. Now, 60% broadband penetration in the urban areas. That's our market. And we are confident if the opposition can get its act together with the information war, we call it information war, that we embarked on since 2004, 7 years ago, we can reach the voters. And now, the biggest headache for the mainstream newspapers is how can they also get onto the internet to fight us on the internet. That is their biggest challenge at the moment. And I think as what Rupert Murdoch said, I think about 3 or 4 years ago in one conference, the greatest challenge to mainstream newspapers or to print newspapers by the year 2030 will be how to switch over from print onto electronic. Because by 2030, no one will be buying any print newspapers. Everything now is online. And imagine how many trees you have to chop just to print the newspapers. And we, the opposition, are way ahead of the Malaysian government as far as the media war in the internet is concerned. They can't match us. Hopefully, 5-10 years from now, when the media is fully electronic, that's when the government is going to have a hard trouble in its propaganda campaign.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Hi, thanks for the talk. I'm from Singapore, and I'd just like to say that I think our two governments have a lot more in common than they would like to admit, at least in domestic law. You mentioned the culture of fear using the ISA, and in Singapore we of course have it as well. And while the government hasn't actually used it much, they prefer libel law, but they like to keep it as a reserve, as the whisper in the dark, just in case you're up to something very funny. And again, this produces the result that many people, especially the older generation, the baby boomer generation, are terribly afraid. They won't dare to speak, they won't dare to talk, they won't dare to even say who they voted for because there is this ISA. Now, I guess my question is, how do we break the cycle of fear? How do we really get the young, especially the younger generation, to actually take the chance and take the risk to be that generation that finally breaks this cycle, instead of letting the fear carry on from the previous generation down and all the way downwards?
Honestly, I don't know how we're going to overcome that. I think the ISA has been around just too long, 50 years now. And I think the longest ISA detainee is that Singaporean, 23 years, wasn't it? He was 23 years. And after he was released, he became stateless because they withdrew his citizenship. I think this is one of the greatest successes of Singapore and Malaysia, And of course, the other countries would have been Hong Kong and South Africa, which also had the ISA. But now they have Bill of Rights, they don't have ISA anymore. As I said, the ISA is a very effective tool. It makes people behave. And to get people to defy the government is not going to be easy when this fear of ISA is constantly hanging over you. I suppose the only way we can do it is to get many people out there. So people will feel the confidence of numbers, Okay, there's 10,000 of us on the streets, and they know you can't arrest all 10,000 people. But if only 2 of us demonstrate, it's so easy, like Hindraf, 200 people came out, they arrested more than 100. And now they're probably going to charge 5 of the ringleaders. But you think they could have arrested? When we did the march in November 2007, we had 50,000 people on the streets. And of course they shot tear gas. But we fought back. I mean, you see the red shirts. We also have red shirts, the past red shirts. They locked hands and they fought back and pushed. And some of the police fell down, and we marched to the King's Palace, and they couldn't arrest anybody. And that got them actually quite angry. The safety of numbers. And we had a lot of Chinese who came out that day. And I know that was the first time they came out, because quite a few of them said when they saw the police come, they sort of panicked. But when they saw the Malays lock arms and push the police, the Chinese became brave. They started marching because they saw all these Malays in front, red shirts, locking hands and pushing the police, and they got into the mood. And since then, a lot of these Chinese have become very active politically, practically campaigning every by-election, going here and there. And I suppose it will have to be we Malays who give the Chinese the confidence that they're not alone. They're not alone. In fact, there's more of us. And you're not going to be victimized anymore like in the past. And when you see this huge crowd, and the government just cannot arrest everybody, that I suppose eventually will erase this fear factor of but of course people like us who are planning all these demonstrations will end up under ISA. And but there must always be other leaders to take over later, just to keep it going, And but if you're alone, if you're one man trying to fight the government, and you're Chinese, you're going to say it's not worth it. The risks are just too great, you see. But when we say, hey, there's another 10,000 Chinese and 40,000 Malays out there, you'll roll up your sleeve and say, let's go. Suddenly you're charged up, So we have to get the numbers. And once we get the numbers, you're not going to be scared anymore. Because, I mean, you're not going to be arrested, because there's like 49,000 people in front of you first. They have to arrest them before they can get to you, you see. So I suppose that is how we eventually have to help people overcome their fear.
Thank you, sir, for your speech.
Nice and loud so people up the back can hear.
Thank you, sir, for your speech. I was actually thinking you didn't really mention a lot about the police force and also about the judicial system.
The what system?
The judiciary system.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's been a bit of an issue about the judges, about the selection, also about how police power is being abused. I was thinking maybe you could elaborate a bit more on that.
Okay.
People up the back hear that? The question about to comment on the police force and the judiciary.
40 minutes, it doesn't give me much time to talk, But I have ceramah for 2 hours non-stop, so... Okay, what we're trying to do, and we're talking, when I say we, I'm always talking about the MCLM, the Civil Liberties Movement, not so much opposition. What we're trying to do is, we're trying to restore the 4 branches of government. Now, many of you may not realize that actually we used to have 4 branches of government. We had the executive, which is the Prime Minister. Then we got the judiciary, the courts. And then we got the legislative, which is Parliament. And we have the monarchy, the rulers, the 10 rulers, There's 20 rulers altogether. Half of them live in Malaysia. And we have 1 king and 9 sultans, Now, back in the 80s, leading up to early 90s, UMNO destroyed this. We had the constitutional crisis, we had the judicial crisis, we had all sorts of crises. And basically, the powers of the judiciary, the monarchy, even parliament were dismantled. And power is concentrated in the hands of one man, the executive. Now, it appears from the outside that we've got a democracy going. We've got an election system. The elections are rigged. There's a lot of fraud. And this so-called 4 branches of government doesn't exist. If the sultans do not agree, UMNO goes against the sultans, so the sultans have got to agree to everything and anything, including like what happened in Perak, where the Sultan of Perak initially agreed to not make any decision, and 2 hours later when the Prime Minister Najib went to meet him, he came out and says yes, he's going to allow UMNO to take over. I don't know what Najib whispered in his ear, something very frightening maybe. So he had to say yes to UMNO. So even the monarchy can be compromised. The judiciary, it doesn't exist. The promotion of judges is based on the Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister will decide who is the Chief Justice. And the Chief Justice will decide who gets promoted and who gets sent into cold storage. And many good judges, many good judges have been sent into cold storage. They've been sent to Kot Dagang, for instance. Now, one judge as an example, Hishamuddin. Datuk Hishamuddin actually should be the Chief Justice today. Instead, he's sent to Kot Dagang, where all he does is hear these unpaid credit card cases, you know. I mean, for a senior man like that, that's a job you give him. The dismantling of the powers of all these other branches of government was done way back in the 80s. And every Prime Minister since then has never restored. Now what we want to do, MCLM, is to restore back these 4 branches of government. And one of the ways we want to do it is to introduce independent members of parliament. And that's one of the reasons, but not the only reason, but one of the reasons why we want independent members of parliament. Because currently, whatever members of parliament we have are either from this party or this party. And who's representing the people? Nobody. We call them Wakil Rakyat, but when they go to parliament, they become Wakil Party. So they are party reps, not people's representative, even though we call them people's representative. So in this case, as long as parliament is under control of either one man here or one man there, and the judiciary is under control of just one man, and that one man is appointed by that one man, and so on and so forth, it's a one-man government. Basically, it's a one-man government, that's all. But can the opposition agree to these reforms? Can the opposition agree, for instance, to some judicial commission, and the appointments of judges and the promotions of judges are done by the judicial commission? And who does this judicial commission report to? The Prime Minister or Parliament? These are issues which even the opposition have not addressed. And that's why we are giving the opposition a hard time, because we want them to address these issues, give us their commitment before the election, so that we will decide whether to vote for them or not, because we will know that if they do form the government, this is how the government is going to be run. Then only will we see these changes. Now we got what we call a Rakyat Reform Agenda, RARA. The Rakyat Reform Agenda basically is the election manifesto from the people. And the people are giving the political parties the election manifesto, as opposed to the political parties drawing up the election manifesto, promising us what they're going to do if they form the government. We don't want to see that. See, we're not interested in your manifesto. We have our own, we're giving it to you, you accept it, we vote for you. If you say you can't accept it, we might not even bother to vote at all. This is the message we are sending. If not, as what you said, you know, all this compromising of judiciary, the police and everything, including the monarchy and parliament, will never be solved. Not even if the opposition comes to power. Because if I'm the opposition leader and I become the Prime Minister, would I want to give up so much power?
Yeah, right up the back there.
In your personal opinion, do you think that new economic policy should be abolished anytime soon?
Everything I've said thus far is my personal opinion. Well, the new economic policy, what's it about? Does it exist?
The 30% of our nation's profit being given to the Bumiputras.
You see, the new economic policy is an aspiration. It's just an aspiration, hasrat dasar ekonomi baru. It is not law. And the Constitution, in fact, guarantees the right of everyone to do business without government interference. Now, the NEP is unconstitutional. It violates the Constitution. And it's not even law, mind you. It was not passed by Parliament, yeah? It is just a policy. And it's an aspiration of the Prime Minister or the Prime Minister and his cabinet. Now, a lot of Chinese have asked me, why do you Malays have this discrimination? A law like NEP which puts certain quotas, you know, like ITM is 100% for Malays. Even when Khalid Ibrahim, the Chief Minister of Selangor, suggested that some of the courses be open to non-Malays, maybe 10%. He didn't say the whole ITM. Some of the courses. Those are courses which are not popular anyway. You can't get enough Malays anyway. So why don't we open up to non-Malays? And that already, there was a huge demonstration, protest and everything. Now, the Malays feel that because we have an NEP, therefore we can have government institutions or government-run universities and colleges exclusive to the Malays, 100%. But isn't that discrimination? Can you be denied entry into a school because of your gender, because of the color of your skin, because of your religious beliefs, or because you're 4'9" and you know only above 5 feet can go in? Look, there cannot be any discrimination for whatever reason it may be. But in Malaysia we do. And what does the Constitution say about it? And this violates this. And doesn't the Constitution of Malaya say, which is now the Constitution of Malaysia, that this Constitution is final, this Constitution is supreme, this Constitution basically is above everything, and any laws passed after Merdeka which are not consistent with the Constitution are automatically null. So which means even the NEP is cancelled out. You can go to court and challenge it, and you say that my constitutional right, you can't block me from going to ITM. But of course, if you do open ITM to the non-Malays, I doubt that many people want to go there, because if you have an ITM certificate, you don't get a job. But just for argument's sake, we want it to be open to the non-Malays, knowing non-Malays will not go anyway. But why aren't the Chinese and Indians doing something about it now? This is a policy by the Prime Minister and his cabinet. In fact, the Prime Minister makes an announcement and it's taken as law. You want to form a company, you must find a Bumiputra to take 30% of your shares. Most times he's got no money, you give him free shares anyway. Yeah? And the Chinese running the business will make sure that the business lose every month, so the Malay don't get anything on his 30%. And these poor Chinese who put the millions for the business and changes his BMW and Mercedes every year, but he says his company lose money. So the Malays are actually suckers. They're the Alibaba, you know, and it is the 40 thieves and not Alibaba who takes all the loot. Now please remember, UMNO has only 70 overseats in Parliament. UMNO. Yeah? We're talking about UMNO in West Malaysia. How can UMNO run the country with 70 over seats? How can UMNO come up with a new economic policy that discriminates against the Chinese and Indians? It is almost like South Africa's apartheid. Alright? Or Hong Kong in those days. Chinese and dogs not allowed. So it's discrimination. But why do the Chinese allow it? Now with 70 over seats which the Chinese have, which UMNO has, and another 70, slightly under 70 seats which the non-Malays, the Chinese, Indians, Kadazan, Dayaks and everything have, that's how UMNO holds power. UMNO holds power through Barisan Nasional, not through UMNO. But if MCA, which has 15 seats, Gerakan which has 3, MIC which has 2, there's total 20 seats. If they pull out because they are objecting or protesting against the racial discrimination, and if the Christians and the Ibans and the Dayaks of Sabah and Sarawak also pull out because of the discrimination they also suffer, with 70 seats, UMNO will be now the opposition. And all these things like NEP, Article 153, everything can end overnight. The people who are perpetuating the new economic policy are not the Malays. It is the Chinese, the Indians, the Dayaks, the Kadazans, the Dusuns, basically the natives from Sabah and Sarawak. They are the ones perpetuating the NEP. And then I have my Chinese friends screaming, say, why lah, you Malays like that? I say, hey, poda. What we Malays? We Malays are opposition lah. We got 80 over there in the opposition. You say, yeah, but the government is what? UMNO 70 seats against us 80 over seats. But the 70 over seats who are with UMNO, they are the problem. So who is keeping the NEP alive? The Chinese, the Indians, and the others.
Okay, just here in the blue shirt. Yeah.
All right, I'd like to talk about East Malaysia. Okay, I think when you talk about East Malaysia, you're specifically talking about the rural constituencies, which people are less educated. I know that you're superior in the opposition is superior in the war of information, but you can't beat the head up of UMNOs. You gotta admit that. And their party machinery is strong. They play the card of fear. So consider all these factors, and UMNO playing the card of fear. To what extent the candidate's quality make a difference in East Malaysia? Because from my knowledge, people just vote black.
I'm afraid the people in East Malaysia are not too worried about quality. It's more the money that they can get for voting. Now, you see in Sarawak, let's look at Sarawak, because Sarawak is the next state that's going to have the elections, yeah? That will probably be way before the general elections, unless Najib calls for the general elections simultaneously with Sarawak. But we feel he will not unless he resolves this Anwar Ibrahim sodomy trial. Only when he has Sumbat Anwar in jail, probably he'll call for elections. Now Sarawak has 71 seats. State seats. It's got 31 parliament seats. But the parliament elections will not be held simultaneous here with the state elections. Now out of 71 seats, DAP probably has a good chance of winning about 15. They can contest maybe 20. They might win about 15 seats from the current 9 that they have. But those are predominantly Chinese seats, where is a majority Chinese population. Then we have the Dayak seats and basically the natives. This is probably going to be the rest. We're talking about 50 over seats. Now, some of those seats are way in the remote areas of Sarawak, You got to go in by helicopter, and it takes a few days by river and stuff like that. It's going to be very, very difficult to talk to these people. Most of them don't even know what's going on outside their long houses. They are really stuck in the rural areas. Now the fact that they got 71 seats, and some of these seats, like the voters are miles apart from one to the other, I don't think we're going to win those seats. And the government goes in tight, will go in and just pour money into the longhouses. They've never seen so much money in their life. They're going to send in a tuak. Next morning, they're too drunk to vote, you know. And so they're probably going to sweep 40 over seats. Close eyes, as the Chinese say, tutup mata, close eyes, they're going to sweep. So we have to focus on probably about 30 seats at best. Now, if the opposition can get at least, say, 30 seats in Sarawak, realizing that 41 will still be with Barisan, therefore they will still be the government, but there'll be a state government without 2/3. And with 30 seats falling to the opposition, this will give a message to the neighboring state Sabah, that the Sarawak people there vote for change. Aren't you also going to vote for change? We got 31 parliament seats in Sarawak, 1 in Labuan and 25 in Sabah. That's total of 57. If we can capture 30 of those 57, if the opposition can capture 30 of those 57, plus what they have in West Malaysia, so they got a chance. So the opposition should not aim to form the next state government. It's impossible. We can't reach the voters. Our media is basically urban. Aim for the 20 urban seats. Try to get another 10 slightly rural, but not too rural like in the longhouses. And if you can get those 30 seats, it's going to send shockwaves into Barisan Nasional in East Malaysia. And the people will suddenly say, hey, it looks like we're going for change. Come the general elections, then a good portion of the 31 parliament seats in Sarawak and 25 in Sabah will fall to the opposition. The Sabah voters are ready to change, but they don't have the guts to change. What they want to do is to first see whether the change comes in West Malaysia. If the change comes, they'll walk over. But if they walk over now, and you're still not going to form the federal government, you know, it's like sending them out to be massacred, because there's going to be no backup. So they need to see that if I join you, you and me combined, we got enough majority to form government. Then they join. But if I join you and we still don't have enough majority, I better play safe, stick with the government, at least I can get money. That is the attitude of Sabah and Sarawak. So yes, it's not easy to reach them, but we can reach those in the urban areas. And if the push can come from the urban areas, then we can get the rural to swing over. And that's where we have been most successful. We got Penang, we got Perak, at least we had Perak, then we got Selangor. And I believe we can get back Perak next election.
What's your take on Johor?
Johor is still the kubu. The kubu of UMNO, fortress of UMNO. And even UMNO knows that you see, most of the MCA and Gerakan seats are all from Johor. Penang, they got wiped out, massacred. Perak, all got. It's actually Johor where all the Chinese seats from MCA and Gerakan come from. And they know that the Johor base is very, very strong. Even the Sultan supports UMNO. The late Sultan used to support UMNO. He tell the Malays proudly that UMNO was a party that was formed in my palace. So I support UMNO. You know, the late Sultan of Johor. He openly supported, even though Sultan's not supposed to be political. And that's why Shah Soilek is the president of the MCA, because he's from Johor. And it's got nothing to do about his performance in the video.
Okay, well, we've got quite a few hands, so we'll try to get through as many as we can, but we might have to ask for quick questions and relatively quick answers.
Okay.
So let's go up the back here first.
Mine is really quick, and that's about corruption. Do you think the level of corruption in Malaysia is on the increase or decline?
Do I really need to answer that? It's worse, certainly. Short enough?
Right here.
Yeah, no matter how good a person is, ultimate power corrupts. So my question is, what are checks and balances in place for the opposition should they take power? Because keep in mind that once upon a time, Anwar Ibrahim was under Mahathir. He was a DPM. So what are checks and balances to prevent from the emergence of the new PM should the opposition take over?
You know, this is my favorite question. I've always said that when the plague was ravaging London, 1/3 of the urban population, 1/3 of the population of London and the cities died of the plague. Then they had the fire of London, and the fire basically burnt all the rats. Then the plague was cured. So the fire of London actually was good in that sense, yeah? The only way to eliminate this plague of corruption is to burn the rats. And we have to act very strongly against corrupt government officers, politicians and what. Now this is where probably the politicians will not agree. The politicians say we must have a truth and reconciliation ministry or committee, and if we form the government, we give amnesty, make all those people who stole the money sort of surrender back the money, we will not prosecute them. I would rather go the other way. I would rather do what Iran did when they toppled the Shah. They lined up everyone and shot all the corrupt officials, you know. Now, we need an ombudsman. And we want the opposition to commit itself to this. And we want people in that ombudsman who are going to be brutal towards corrupt officers. Freeze their assets, impound their passport, do whatever, but go for them. But again, the opposition says if we were to say that, nobody in government will vote for us, because these are all corrupt officers and they'll be scared of seeing us in power. So they're saying, no, we won't do this, we'll compromise and stuff like that. But unless the opposition is prepared to take some very unpopular steps or make unpopular decisions, and that is all in the interest of eliminating corruption, unless the opposition is prepared not to play politics, just to make the government officers feel safe and secure so that they continue to get our support, then I don't think if the opposition takes over, we're going to eliminate corruption. You look at Selangor. There's still a very high level of corruption in Selangor, in spite of what the opposition says. I personally know of many cases where even some within the present government are involved in corruption, and this upsets us. And that's why we want the opposition to commit itself before election, not after election. If not, it's just going to be the same old wine in a new bottle. It's not going to taste any better just because the bottle looks nicer.
Right up the back there.
Pete, I'm sure you must be aware that the Prime Minister and her husband are coming tomorrow to Canberra. So if you see her, are you going to...
Bit louder, please.
Sorry? I'm sure you must be aware that the Prime Minister and her husband are coming tomorrow to Canberra. And if you see her, what will you tell her?
Sorry, what was the question?
See the Prime Minister tomorrow, what will you tell him?
I don't know, that Rolf Harris song, what, Tie Me Kangaroo Down Spot or something, I doubt I'll be meeting the Prime Minister.
You meant the Malaysian.
Yeah, the Malaysian Prime Minister. He's arriving tonight, incidentally. He's got a few functions tomorrow. I planned my trip way back in September last year. So a lot of people ask me, am I following him here? I said, no, he's following me. And, well, I don't know what to say to him other than, met any lovely Mongolian ladies lately?
Okay, question here. There and here. Two more.
Hello, Pete, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
What's the take on Perkasa?
Perkasa.
Yep.
We have Perkasa, we have Perkida. They're more or less almost the same. You know, they just wear different hats. Perkida is the paramilitary unit formed by UMNO soon after May 13. This is supposed to be the fifth column or the front line. In the event that the government loses power, in the event that Barisan loses power, these will be the people who take to the streets to start a little civil war so that they can declare emergency, suspend parliament, and take back the country. Perkasa, you can see Dr. Mahathir is behind it. Ibrahim Ali works for Dr. Mahathir, that's no secret. Probably even Dr. Mahathir is funding it, I don't know. But Perkasa is a movement that is supposed to uphold Article 153 of the Constitution, Malay rights and privileges, the new economic policy, and take on the Chinese if the Chinese ever dare challenge the NEP or Article 153. But at the end of the day, people like Ibrahim Ali or Perkasa is in business with people like Vincent Tan. So here you are, supposedly fighting for Malay rights and condemning the Chinese who are robbing the country and leaving nothing for the Malays. And whereas you yourself are in business with the very Chinese who you said are robbing the country. Perkasa is just what we call a movement to stir the shit, that's all. And when they do that, then the government can come in and says, hey, look, you know, either you guys tone down or we'll have Operasi Lalang version 2. And this is what they did for the first Operasi Lalang.
I'm just wondering, in the next election, what's your take on the Najib factor? Because I'm a Singaporean, and regarding the policies that is put into perspective, the sense that he's trying to tone down NEP, Satu Malaysia, good foreign relations, trying to get in investment from China and so on. Last year I was speaking to some university dons in UKM, and they were very impressed with Najib, and I was looking at his photograph, there's this halo around it these days. So I guess he's got a good political lineage as well as a royalty thing, and in Asia they're very impressed by the big man in politics. So what's your take on that?
When Mahathir took over as Prime Minister, within a few months he called for elections. He went back to the people to get a legitimate mandate and not remain as an illegitimate Prime Minister. When Abdullah Badawi took over from Mahathir on 1st November, 5 months later, he also called for new elections and go back to the people and get a mandate so that you become the legitimate Prime Minister, not just inherited the throne. Najib has been Prime Minister for some time now. Why doesn't he do what Abdullah Badawi and Mahathir did before him? Within 6 months, go back to the people, hold general elections and get a mandate from the people, that the people voted you into office. Nobody voted Najib into office. At least Abdullah Badawi and Mahathir, you can say they were voted into office, yeah? Najib's yet to be voted. Now, if Najib is confident of winning the next election, why doesn't he have it now? The fact that he does not want to have elections is because he has been told there's a 50-50 chance he can win. Actually, it is very hard for Barisan to win the election. Our worry is not Barisan winning, but the opposition losing it because of the various blunders, mistakes and stupid things the opposition is doing. If elections were held within 6 months of Najib taking over, today we will have a new government. But the longer they prolong, okay, so Najib's illegitimate, he hasn't been voted into office, but there's worse things he's done which he's not ashamed of. And being a legitimate Prime Minister is not the biggest of his problems. He can drag until March 2013, and the way things are going, the opposition might self-destruct, you know, over the next 2 years. And it's going to be a walkover for Barisan. So I think Najib is quite prepared to be illegitimate for the meantime, ride out this another 2 years, so he'll be 3 years as non-elected Prime Minister, and then go for the big one. Come next election, if he sweeps the seats, if he kills the opposition like what happened in 2004, the opposition will never come up again. Not for a long, long time.
Okay, I think we've got time for one more question. Do we have... Yes, right here.
Hi sir, thank you very much for the entertaining and informative talk. As you mentioned, I mean, the Barisan Nasional control the machinery of the state. The odds are overwhelmingly against the opposition. And basically with gerrymandering and various other issues you talked about. Some people have said that, with the MCLM, you're basically splitting the opposition up. So what would you say to that? And does the MCLM represent a decisive split away from the opposition? And as you said, the prospects of the opposition are pretty thin. So with a split within the opposition, how do you see that improving?
Most people ask that question, and they also add a bit more whether the MCLM is a political party. We've made it very clear, MCLM is a movement, not political party. How can we split the votes if we're not contesting the elections? Did we say we're going to contest elections? Why is everyone assuming we're going to contest elections? What we want to do is assist the opposition, help the opposition by offering better candidates. Our worry is, assuming Pakatan wins another 30 seats, extra 30 seats, and they end up with 112, which means Barisan will have only 110. Now, with just 2 seats majority, you lose 1 member of parliament, is a hung parliament, 111, 111. You lose 2, you lose the government. All you need is for 2 parliamentarians to join the frog festival and you're done, yeah? Now, we want this margin to go up. It's too risky to form a government with just 2-seat majority. You must get at least an additional 10, preferably 20 seats, because it's harder to buy off 20 people than it is to buy 2 people. Now, what they say, what the opposition says, they have a problem getting good candidates. We says, look, you feel these candidates, very low quality, and when they win, just for 2-3 million, 5 million, they walk over to the other side. He says, yeah, but we can't get good candidates, what can we do? We say, if that's your problem, let us help you. We'll offer you 30 candidates. And with these 30 candidates, that they're going to contest under opposition, We are not contesting. I'm giving them to you, for you to use to contest the election. How are we splitting the votes?
Can I ask something further to that?
Very, very quick follow-up.
So what are the conditions? Do they have to sort of submit? You're talking about the RARA, right?
Yeah.
Do they have to agree to those conditions in order to get the support from the MCLM? What are the conditions tied to support of the...
These are people who support the reform agenda. These are people who are already involved in a lot of human rights work. They've in fact done some very unpopular things. As an example, Malay Imtiaz, he's a human rights lawyer. He's actually defended people who want to leave Islam. Now, can you imagine the difficulty for a Muslim to leave Islam and to become a Hindu or Christian? In some countries, you get put to death. In Malaysia, they detain you. They put you in a detention camp if you want to leave Islam, and then they send you for rehabilitation, religious rehabilitation, so that you come back to the right path. Now they go to court, and they challenge the right to leave Islam, because in the constitution it says, it is your right. So people like Malay Imtiaz, although he's a Muslim, he's defended Hindus and non-Muslims who want to leave Islam. He's been condemned by 90% of Malaysia's Muslims as aiding and abetting people who wish to murtad. What better guarantee do we have that a man like this will defend your civil rights when he even dare go against the mullahs and the imams and the muftis and even risk a fatwa being issued for his head to be chopped off. These are the kind of people who are contesting the election. I certainly have high confidence for them. They have put their own safety, their own life, okay, way above everything else. And Malay has received a lot of death threats, you know. But he's still defending Hindus, those Hindus or Muslims who want to leave Islam and become a Hindu again. He has not stopped.
Okay, we're going to have to wind that up there. Thank you very much for your questions, and thank you very much.